Welcome to ASA Central Line, the official podcast series of the American Society of Anesthesiologists, edited by Dr. Adam Stryker.
Welcome to Central Line. I'm your host and editor, Dr. Adam Stryker. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by an old friend whose career has evolved in a very unexpected way. Dr. Juliet Schmalz, who, after many years of being an anesthesiologist, left the practice of medicine to start a bourbon company. I'm always interested to hear about colleagues who pursue unconventional activities or career paths. So as you can imagine, I am excited to hear about Dr. Schmalz's adventure. So let's get started. Julie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Adam. Great talking to you. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks for being with us. This is a fun episode for me to go through because we talk about anesthesia specific things so often. So it's a nice change of pace for us. But more importantly, I am really interested to hear about your journey. And so why don't we start off like we usually do with our guests, having you talk a little bit about your background and how you ended up where you are now.
Well, I'm from Indianapolis. Went to Indiana University for school and then stayed to do my residency in anesthesiology at IU as well. That's where I met Dr. Adam Stryker. And I guess in med school we met. And then I stayed in Indianapolis and worked at a community hospital. Spent the majority of my career there. And, it was within a couple of years in where I was like, ooh, I'm not doing this all the way till I'm 65.
Now, we've known each other a long time. You practiced in Indianapolis or in the area around Indianapolis for many years. And I do want to talk about bourbon specifically, but let's back up just for a sec and talk a little more about where the seeds were planted, where you thought maybe I'd like to pursue something different. Was it, this was always an interest, the bourbon industry specifically, or was it, I'm not as thrilled with my daily practice, I need to look for something else, and then stumbled upon that?
It was definitely I'm not feeling like this is something I want to do for my entire career. I spent a lot of that time, those years, trying to make it for me something that was more palatable, getting more involved, trying to change some things within our group, like, on a small level, trying to make some changes to make it better for all of us, including myself, just to prolong my career. And then I started pursuing some things that were adjacent to medicine. I was trained in acupuncture, had a side business, kind of knew that wouldn't be a full career. The model didn't really work. But to me, it was a little more fulfilling to have those clients, those patients that I could take care of in kind of more my way. And that introduced me to integrative medicine. And I did an integrative medicine fellowship at University of Arizona. And all while I was working, so that I was just trying to find my place in medicine and make it feel more fulfilling for me. And, I just kept struggling with, part of it was just having a business and making that leap and taking those risks. And so I just kind of kept bouncing back, or like staying actually in anesthesia, and was always pretty much kind of on the lookout for finding something that would be more fulfilling for me and could, elongate my career. And then I met my now husband in 2017, and he is a businessman. He has started up businesses and is very comfortable with writing business plans. And that was kind of the thing that was missing in my comfort zone and my expertise. And so in 2017, he said, I know you're not happy. What would you want to do? And, the list was pretty short. It was either start an acupuncture business or start a whiskey business. And that does seem extremely random. And it kind of is, but I'd always had some interest in like the science behind it. Started kind of with wine, just the interest of how you take grapes, for example, of wine and, make all of these decisions and then wait. And then, on the other side, you have something delicious. And then when I got into bourbon a little more, was kind of when the bourbon boom was starting. I realized it was even more interesting to me, is particularly the barrel and what the barrel has to do with the aging process and what the product's going to be on the other side. So I was just like, I've always been interested, so I'd love to learn how to make bourbon. And then we just thought, well, let's just figure out if we can learn that. And if that's the case, we could potentially start a business.
So I imagine it's easy to get into something that you're interested, but it's difficult to actually take the step to leave something you've known for a long time, a la medicine. How difficult was it to actually take that step, to actually sever what you had been practicing for so long, to take a risk and go on to a new adventure?
Um, there's kind of two different things to that. One is I wasn't intending to leave when I did. COVID kicked me out the door. And it was just, circumstances where I had turned in my notice. I was going to work PRN. My last day as a partner was March 31st, 2020. And I had a job that looked good lined up to do acupuncture on the side. And I'd do PRN anesthesia. Then I'd start up this business. Well, then when COVID happened, I had no contract April 1st of 2020, and there wasn't work for months and months and months. So I eventually was just like, well, I guess I'm done.
Mhm.
So that wasn't the intention to just sever, but also in retrospect, in some ways, I feel like I stayed too long as it was, because just my sentiment about it is just like, ugh, like there's a part of me that was so glad to get out of there. But then there's another part of me that's like, oh my gosh, I didn't even get to leave on my own terms, which still bothers me.
Sure. Well, certainly, COVID shook up so many of us in terms of our practices and where people ended up.
Yeah.
So obviously mixed feelings then about how it all transpired.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, honestly, if COVID had not happened, maybe I'd still be working a day or two a week. Probably would.
Just to follow up on that, do you feel like this actually was more beneficial in the sense that you're able to devote all your time to it? And do you feel it would have been as successful had you had kept a foot in medicine working PRN?
I think I could have carved out, whatever time I wanted to keep up my skills in anesthesia, potentially doing acupuncture, and then, having my business be the most important thing. Um, hard to say, but I was able to devote more of my time. So, maybe there were some upsides to it as well.
Let's talk about your company. The name of your company is Fortune's Fool, which is, and correct me if I'm wrong, from Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Go ahead and talk a little bit about how you came up with that name and about the specific products and if they share that theme.
We were working with our marketers to come up with our branding, and they're tossing around ideas, and they thought because my name is Juliet, even though I don't go by it, that was something that we could latch on to and create a really cool brand behind Shakespeare theme, Romeo and Juliet theme, without being too on the nose. So we took that and came up with Fortune's Fool. Fortune's Fool comes from a line that Romeo says when he kills Mercutio. Actually, it's kind of dark. He kills Mercutio and he exclaimed, "Oh, I am Fortune's Fool." And, we even did some polling with like bartenders and stuff, like what names they thought sounded cool. And so, we did a little research in it. But we all really liked that because some people would get it, most people probably wouldn't. So sometimes I explain it to people, sometimes I don't, particularly connecting it to my name, Juliet, and the theme, the branding. There's no Shakespearean, well, maybe there's a teeny bit of it in there, but it's not like in your face. So I like the subtlety of it as well.
Sure. It's a great name. And I love the layers. Um, we'll talk a little bit about the bourbon itself. What is unique about your product? How is it similar, different than what we might see typically on the shelves?
So originally, we were going to build a distillery and create our own product in-house in Indianapolis. And that's a good thing that that fell through because it was right before COVID. And that would have been, remember, construction prices just went through the roof.
Right.
After that, I probably would have been problematic. So what we ended up doing, the other option is there's three options. You can make your own in a distillery. You can buy pre-aged barrels that someone else made and it has been aging. And it's completely legitimate to just buy those barrels and put it in your bottle and call it your product. You can blend it, you cannot blend it. A lot of companies do that when they get started because even if they're making their own product, it has to age. So they'll buy something that's called sourcing. They'll source it, put their name on it. And a lot of times they're not transparent about that. And I think that's a little bit of a problem, but it's, generally accepted thing to do. I just didn't really want to do that. So what we ended up doing was contract distillation. So I pay someone to make my product for me. So I give them basically the mash bill, which is the recipe, the ratio of grains that I would like in my product. I give them all the specifications of how I want it made, and they own the equipment, so they make the product for me. So that's what we've been doing, and we have great contract distillers, top name. I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement for the products that are out right now, so I can't tell you who made it for me, but
Mhm.
most bourbon drinkers would absolutely know who these people are, and they have a very good product. But I still had to come up with something that would make us stand out, besides the fact that we're just a small company and trying to just kind of stay local-ish, regional, and become kind of like the brand for our region. But we still had to have something that makes us stand out. So our differentiator is that, going back to the barrel thing, the barrel is so important to the flavor of the product. It gives 100% of the color comes from the barrel because the product goes in clear, and it gives a huge amount of the flavor. And so while I was taking all of these classes and learning about how to make whiskey, how to make spirits, everything about the industry, I realized how important the barrel is. And some people they'll cut corners there. They'll buy cheaper barrels. They'll shave down and re-char barrels and use them over again. And for us, we decided, we had interviewed a lot of distillers and asked them, what would you do if you could do anything? And came down to, we got a recommendation for Cooperage that's out in Napa, California, that makes super high end barrels. They started in the wine industry and they still work in the wine industry, but they also make bourbon barrels. And so we went out and met them and toured the facility and decided that, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to only put our whiskey in these top of the line barrels. And what that's going to do is give us better flavor, better complexity, better mouthfeel, all of the subtle things that you can't put your finger on it necessarily, but make you realize like, wow, this is a really good product. And so that's what we do. And it's an investment because these barrels are a lot more expensive than the standard barrels, but it's worth it because even our first product, the Prelude, it was less than 3 years aged. And we fooled a lot of people because they thought it was an older product. They thought it was extremely good. Most people wouldn't want to taste whiskey that's that young. But, when you're a teeny company, the longer you wait and you don't have any
Yeah.
product to sell, it's like, we got to get this product out. So
Right.
that was another strategy. Like if we use these super high end barrels, we want it to taste good. We're not going to release something until it's ready, but that was ready before 3 years old. So that's our strategy. That's what makes us different. And I think a lot of people have responded to it.
Does that give you some reputability when it comes to let's say, the press, for lack of a better term, that covers the bourbon industry, whether it's online or print, or the whiskey industry, that you start out, you release products maybe a little younger, they know that, and then the name gets out there, and then over the years, you get that built-in reputation because of that up
That's
there?
pretty common. All the smaller distilleries, the more local distilleries will release products younger, even if they have other unaged products, because people will be asking, where's your whiskey? Where's your whiskey? I think sometimes people release things before they're truly ready, but some people will buy it, some people will like it, and then, hoping that, well, it's just going to keep getting better over time. But we wanted to start with a little bit higher expectation of flavor profile. And you got to talk someone into, like, a real bourbon connoisseur. You got to really talk them into trying a product that's aged less than 3 years, but got a lot of shocked reactions. So most distilleries do, the little ones do release things young. And I think most people understand, like, maybe this isn't a sipper, maybe this is something you mix in a cocktail, but they're going to keep improving over time. And this is just what you have to do when you're a small business.
I'm going to delve off here into some bourbon specifics here because for a medicine-based anesthesiology podcast, I can't think of a more pertinent topic than discussing the specifics of whiskey. But so just for some of our listeners who may not know, number one, bourbon, by definition, if I'm not mistaken, is at least it has to be 51% corn. Is that
Yeah,
right? Am I
correct.
okay? And then you had already alluded to the specific barrels. Are those the barrels you got? Are they charred by definition because they make them bourbon barrels, or is that not necessarily
Yes.
criteria?
Yeah,
Okay.
they are charred. And I also, it's not mandatory, but I also toast all of my barrels, which is an extra expense, but it gives
Interesting.
prep
Yeah.
the wood a little more for interaction with the whiskey and gives it more of a toasty flavor. It's really popular right now to when you'll see toasted bourbons, and that's bourbons that are in a charred barrel and then get transferred into a toasted barrel for finishing. And so it gives it a different, like, kind of toasty flavor. But we just charred and toasted all of our barrels.
Gotcha. Okay. How long is a typical bourbon or whiskey aged for? Is it usually a few years? We know high-end whiskey is many years, but there's a whole range. And so,
I would say the average is somewhere between 4 and 7 years.
gotcha.
And that's kind of
Okay.
your standard. And there's laws and rules about age statements, but once you get to 4 years, you're not required to put an age statement on your product. We plan to always put an age statement because that's part of the transparency that we want to have. One caveat is, let's say you're blending different barrels together and you're blending 20 10-year-old barrels, and then you put this one barrel that's 5 years is good, and you put one drop of that 5 year barrel in there, you can only call it a 5 year. So
Gotcha.
there's some weird rules around it. But when you see an age statement, that's a good sign because you know that if it says 7 years, then nothing's younger than 7 years, and that product and potentially could be older. And then you'll see a lot of them that don't have age statements, and that's probably because they're taking stuff over 4, because you have to put a statement on up until 4. And then, you want to start bragging at a certain point. Like once you get to like 8, 9, 10, you should put it on there because that's a big deal. But the ones without it, it's probably just a blend somewhere in that range of like 4 to 7.
Okay. Great. Well, let's talk a little bit about the transition again from medicine to a business. Do you have advice for listeners who might be thinking of taking that leap? I imagine we all have thoughts of like, why am I doing this? It's stressful. Is there something better out there for? I have to think that is a very common thought. And you have a unique perspective, and you can't tell anyone what to do. So I'm not asking you to do that. But any insight into individuals who might think that I'd like to do something different, or maybe this interest I have is something more that I could spend more time doing, and but I'm afraid to leave medicine. Or I guess I'm just asking, what kind of insight do you have into that, into making that decision that might be helpful to aid someone else who's having similar thoughts?
I think as someone's considering this, or man, this isn't great, I'd like to do something different. Once it starts affecting you enough that it's more painful to stay than it is to leave, that's definitely a sign to move on. maybe take some time, do some research, really look into something that really draws your attention and draws your passion, and see if it's a viable thing, while you're continuing to do what you're doing now. And then I think in some ways you'll just kind of know, like, if you have to get out, if you've got to take care of yourself and your family, and staying is worse than taking that leap, then that's definitely a sign to take care of yourself. And it may not be the most smooth transition. There may be sacrifices that you're making along the way, but ultimately your physical and mental health and your family's well-being are the most important thing. And just kind of weighing the pros and cons. And I kind of hate it when people say, like, leap and the net will appear. It doesn't seem that easy, because I'm, as many of us probably are listening to this, I'm an over preparer. So I want to be over prepared for any kind of change. And even being as prepared as I was, things happened and it wasn't all wonderful and glorious. But I definitely am glad that I did what I did. And I think I'm a healthier person for it. And so I just think, weigh those things and talk to your family and figure out what's best for you, because there is life outside of the candle lights of the OR. um, it's hard. I have a friend that's an orthopedic surgeon that literally just went from doing mostly bone cancer surgeries at a big medical center and never had call coverage and was just 24/7, went back and did a 1 year fellowship in doing joints. And then he's kind of like, well, I'm not working that much. And he's working plenty, but it's just this mentality of like, well, I'm supposed to be like in the trenches all the time. Like, you've been in the trenches and now you can start to do stuff where you can go home and see your daughter. You know what I mean? Like, it's just,
Yeah.
it's a transition, especially when you're younger and you're out there doing it and it's new. That's great. And then there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what? I want to slow down a little bit. I want to back off a little bit. I want to do something different. It's hard for us because it's been ingrained in us that you go in the trenches and you stay there.
Yeah, no, certainly. Talk a little bit about the business aspect. My dad, for many years, a long time ago, had run a small business. And growing up, I could oftentimes see a lot of the difficulties and stress that went into something that on the outside looks pretty straightforward. And I imagine this is no different, that it is not
Mhm.
so simple. It's not an easy thing I'm going to just start up a business and it's going to be great. And the stress will go down. And I imagine that idealized version is not reality.
Correct. I am so in awe of any product that makes it to the shelf anywhere. And then especially in awe. I just kind of can't believe we even have a product, because it is the second most regulated industry, the spirits industry, second to pharmaceuticals. The amount of regulations that you have to follow, and just the minutia of details of all the crazy things you have to do. We pre-printed our labels for our first product because we were told we have to put the alcohol content on the product. So we
Mhm.
pre-printed, all of these labels. And then when we went to bottle, they're like, oh, well, we're checking the proof here, and that's the official proof. And it was off by,
Oh,
there's this little, you get some wiggle room, but not much. And if you're off by that, because the government wants their taxes for a percent alcohol. You get
sure.
alcohol. And so we bottled everything, but we had to not label and reorder labels. It was off by 0.1%.
Oh, yeah.
So, didn't hurt anything. It kind of delayed the product getting up to Indianapolis and distributed out. In the end, it was no big deal, but it was kind of like, you just cannot believe the amount of
An
tiny,
extra headache that
yeah, and
you're
details.
throwing.
And like,
Yeah.
you're not going to do it right the first time and you're going to get better. each time you do it because now you got the process down. But it's impressive, like all the little things that popped up, especially towards the end of getting the first product out. It was like, my God, this is wild. And it's different stressful than being an anesthesiologist, but it's stressful because you're running on a tight budget, and you don't have room for mistakes, and you're hustling just trying to get people to hear your brand name for the first time. It's a ton of work. It's a different kind of work, I guess. Like,
Mhm.
some of it didn't feel like work, it felt like fun, and some of it was work. So,
Yeah. Well, any skills from being an anesthesiologist that have helped you in this business?
one, from what we went through in school and training, everything, like, we're used to playing the long game, the delayed gratification, kind of
Mhm.
people that can tolerate that definitely translates over to creating a bourbon because you make the product and they're like, okay, see you in a few years. You're just sitting and waiting for your product to age, and it feels like forever. Definitely you gotta play the long game. And also, it's not like you put a product out and suddenly everybody knows who you are and what you stand for, and you get some fans, but the vast majority of people have no idea what your product is. And it's just a lot of hard work, for several years. And that's definitely something I'm used to, not used to taking the shortcut, not used to not doing the work. So definitely that helped.
Do you ever miss anesthesiology?
I mean, there were definitely days where it's like, oh my God, if I worked with this surgeon every day, I could do this forever. So that's not realistic. So in my mind, in an unrealistic world, I could do it. I miss being an active physician. I feel like I'm losing these skills and this knowledge and all this stuff that I spent so much time working to acquire. And that's kind of hard to deal with, especially, I mean, again, I wasn't intending to be like finished when I was. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's a little bit of a bummer, but most of the time I'm really glad I'm not getting up and driving into the operating room. There's some, moments that I miss. I don't have a lot of coworkers and a place of work to go to. And, so I'm working from home, and that's an adjustment, things like that. But like,
Sure.
just being a physician actively is probably, in a kind of a general sense, is probably the thing I miss the most.
Sure. Sure. Well, I think your story, it's not only interesting, but it's so prescient given the current state of medicine now. And, we talk about burnout, we talk about wellness and trying to navigate being a physician amidst this sea of, regulation and stressors and corporatization and whatever particular hurdle that any individual needs to overcome. It's just such an interesting story. And I just really appreciate you sharing it with us. But I don't want to leave without talking about how our listeners can find your bourbon. And so, why don't you tell us what the best way is for them to purchase a bottle?
So right now we have a product out called Overture, and it is a rye whiskey. It's aged a little bit under 4 years, and you can get it Total Wine in Indiana, Total Wine in Kentucky, Big Red stores in Indiana. Again, I know this is not just for Indiana people. For the vast majority of people, you can order through our website. You click on buy our product, and it looks like our website, but it goes to a third party that can ship to 46 states. So you can order it online at fortunesfool.com.
Okay, just
Yeah.
like it sounds. I mean,
Yeah.
okay,
Without the apostrophe. Yeah.
gotcha. Okay. And how about you? Is there any way that some of our listeners are going to know you from being in medicine? How do they follow you along?
Well, we have kept our website updated, and at Fortune's Fool is our Instagram handle, and certainly can reach out to me, Juliet at fortunesfool.com. That's my email address. And I answer every email personally because I love that stuff. Um, while you're on our website, if you want to learn more about our barrels, there's a 3+ minute video about our relationship with our cooperage. It's very visually interesting, and it was so good that we won an Emmy for the video. So check that one out. It'll make you want to drink bourbon immediately.
Fantastic.
We have over 1,000 barrels aging right now, and we've expanded into tequila. So we have some tequila aging
Oh,
down in
okay.
Mexico. And so, that's only going to get better over time.
Well, Julie, thank you so much again for sharing your story, and I wish you the best of luck, and we will follow you closely. And to all our listeners out there, give this a try if whiskey is your thing, and take a look at Fortune's Fool as a company and follow along there.
Thank you, Adam. This has been great. And I know I am the creator of this product and the owner of this company, but it is a really good whiskey. And so I want everyone to taste it. If I could give samples out to everyone, if I could, because it's like, to taste is to believe. It's really good.
Well, now I have the idea for our next live podcast at the ASA annual meeting.
There you go.
We're going to get the audience we really want now.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. Well, thanks again. And we will talk soon. As time goes on, we'll have you back in some time to see how the product's doing and how things have evolved for you.
That would be great. I appreciate that.
Well, Dr. Julie Schmalz, former anesthesiologist, now bourbon entrepreneur. Again, fortunesfool.com is the website. Please check it out. And don't forget to tune in next time to Central Line. Thanks very much. Take care.
From small practices to the world's best teaching hospitals, ASA members have a wealth of experience. Tap into this knowledge through the ASA community, your hub for real conversation, meaningful connections, and valuable support. Find your voice at community.asahq.org. Subscribe to Central Line today, wherever you get your podcasts, or visit asahq.org/podcasts for more.